Hi, I'm John Matthews, veteran law enforcement officer, winery owner, and your host for the podcast version of True Crime and Wine. And I'm pleased that you've joined us for this unique podcast where we feature the fascinating world of serial killers while we enjoy award-winning wine. So, why serial killers and wine? Well, the answer is simple. Since I'm the only winemaker in the world that's captured a serial killer. So, this is real true crime and real wine. Now, in each episode, myself and Brandy Diamond, the popular podcast host of Texas Wine and True Crime, which you can also hear on Spotify and all of your favorite podcast platforms, will join me. And together, we're going to take you on a journey profiling some of the most interesting and intriguing serial killer cases from around the world, all while enjoying some of our favorite wines. Now, I've got my favorite Casaro wine. Today, it's a Tempranillo. Tempranillo grows great here in Texas, but we'll talk about that a little later. So pour yourself a glass of Killer Cabernet or Murderous Merlot and join us for the podcast version of True Crime and Wine. And as always, make sure you share this show on Facebook or your favorite platform with your friends, true crime lovers, and your family. You can like it and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. Leave a review too, and we'll give you a shout out on the show. And if you want to bring us to your city for a live True Crime and Wine, simply email us at truecrime@casarowines.com. True Crime at Casaro Wines, Cassaro wines.com. In this episode, we're going to take you on a journey profiling into the life and crimes of the Highway Strangler, a serial killer who was so controlling he was able to talk multiple people into assisting him with rape, torture, and murder of others before casually dumping his victims alongside busy highways. Now, I want to welcome in my co-host, Brandy Diamond. And Brandy, can you believe that someone is so controlling, so domineering, that they actually enlist the help of not one, but multiple people to rape, torture, and murder? What do you think about this story?
I think that, we're going to get into his early life, John. I don't think this guy had a chance. Being able to convince four other people to be an accomplice to your crimes, and these aren't just your average crimes. These are some very sadistic, very controlling, out in the open crimes that he is committing against young men. And, I don't know how he did it, but he was able to convince four others to participate. So we're going to be talking about his early life, what happened, before he is eventually arrested. And then we'll talk about, what happens after that. But this guy had a lot of victims, a lot of different crimes, and just a sad story for these families.
Well, as always, a sad story for the victims. But to me, this is, again, Brandy, we try to pick really unique crimes. There's a lot of serial killer stories out there, but we want ones that have a certain twist to them. And being able to convince someone, multiple people, to rape, torture, and murder with you, that's kind of astounding to me.
It's interesting. Were they like him? I think we're going to learn who they were, what kind of people they were. Were they uneducated, educated? How did they meet him? How did they know him? And why did they do this? I think that's always the big question: is what makes someone want to be a part of this? And it's just so interesting. But gosh, John, he had a lot of victims. And most of the victims, I believe 12 or more, were done with accomplices of his. So, just fascinating that he was able to do this.
Absolutely amazing. All right, let's get into the story. Now, the serial killer that we're talking about this week, Brandy, is William Bonin. Kind of like the other William Bonin, but born January 8th, 1947. Both of his parents were alcoholics. His father was physically abusive, and he abused both his wife and the children. And even though the wife was abused, she was still very, very domineering towards the kids and suffered from a mental illness. Now, the father was also a compulsive gambler, and he was so bad that he lost their home, Bonin's childhood home. Now, Bonin attended a Catholic school, but was constantly in trouble and forced to leave. They placed him into a strict convent with hard discipline, but there were numerous assaults by students and staff. So here you have him going from a home life that's very difficult into a convent, and there's a lot of discipline issues. He was sexually assaulted at age 8 by an older student at the convent and returned to his parents, but he lived in abject poverty with limited food and clothes. He then moved in with his grandparents, who were known child molesters. You can't make this stuff up.
I know.
Where he was believed to be beaten and sexually assaulted. Brandy, what kind of chance did this kid have?
You know, John, when I started looking at this case, when we talked about doing this, I mean, your heart, it's hard to keep reading on, right? You have a man who, we always say kids, you know, they learn what they live. So from a very young age, he's poverty, sexual assault, abandonment, manipulation. The mother has a mental illness. Father's a gambler, losing the home. I think of safe space and stability, and he has absolutely none. Then you'd put him to the convent where, again, maybe he as a child is thinking this could be a safe space for me. And then
Right.
it becomes as bad as the home life. And so I think, you know, did he even have a chance with this? And you're coming from abuse. I mean, you're right. You can't make this up. And it is just kind of sad that this is really just the way his life started.
Yeah, and it was referred to as a convent in the literature. I think it
Uh-huh.
was more a strict Catholic school, is what it was. But again, I think he felt, okay, by going there, I'll be protected from my parents and my
Mhm.
grandparents. But unfortunately, he wasn't protected from anybody.
You know, it's not just, I mean, and what are, I was talking to you about this earlier. What are the odds that you have a mother, a father, and both grandparents that are abusive and are actually known abusers at this time? And, you know, the family life and then the school support system, there's just none of that for him. Um, and he also had a brother, John, right? Did he end up the same way?
No, exactly opposite. So that's when we talk about this nature versus nurture. Questions come up every time I do a true crime and wine out there across the country. Audience members ask me, you know, John, is it nature or nurture? I think this is a perfect example of you have to have the nexus of nature and nurture, the perfect bad storm to create a serial killer, because his brother is growing up in the exact same house, in the exact same conditions: abusive father, abusive mother, abusive grandparents, exact same conditions. And he even attended the same Catholic school, but he
Mm.
wasn't an offender, let alone a serial killer. So, you know, we talk about
Yeah.
this all the time. It's not one or the other. It's not just all nature. It's not just all nurture. It's got to be that perfect storm. And for him, it started early, stealing hubcaps and license plates. You know, we see these petty crimes with lots of serial killers. And he was arrested multiple times for petty theft. And he was sent to jail. And again, what happens in jail? He's molested by an adult counselor at the facility. Just
I mean,
just incredible. And then get
incredible.
this, after his release, he goes home and what does he do? He sexually assaults the younger brother. And we know he molested young boys and exposed himself to a 10-year-old girl. So, you talked about earlier, what are the chances of grandparents and parents and now children? But we know that there's a very high statistical probability that abuse victims become abusers. And I think that's what you saw in this case.
Absolutely. And I think, and it's also, you hear, and typically it is like a sibling, right? Or it's a cousin, or it's someone else in the family that I don't know if it's comfort for them. I don't know if it's inflicting something that they're feeling onto them. I mean, I don't know, but it is not uncommon for the abused to become the abuser and also to do that to a direct relative.
Yeah, and so even at an early age here, we see him abused by the parents, abused by the grandparents, abused in the school, and when he goes to jail, abused in the jail. There's got to be some commonality here. I'm not sure what it is, but certainly his brother is not suffering this, and he is. So let's kind of get into his teenage years a little bit. He's still a young person at this point. During his
Yeah.
teenage years, he was a social outcast in high school. I think you could probably see that he was a loner. He ended up dropping out of high school. He says later on that he had an intense interest in pedophilia, even in high school. So he was predisposed, or felt like he was predisposed, to molesting other children, and he admits to molesting several neighborhood children during his teenage years. His parents finally kicked him out of the house, I think, for his criminal behavior and his sexual behavior. And he left and became engaged to a woman named Linda, and he told her he had nightmares about sexually assaulting and murdering young women. Were those nightmares, Brandy, or was that just a precursor?
Precursor, and you have to think though, I think of like as a child, and going through these types of things, the brain is wired, right? The brain is so much more powerful than I think people sometimes understand. And that experiences like this shape our brain and our thought process and our decision making. And so these aren't just nightmares. This is actually his life, right? These are the things this is what he lives. And I think he's just going to reflect that into society and become exactly what he's going through at this point. So it's all got to be correlated, right, John?
He's a monster. He's being treated like a monster and becoming a monster. Certainly, all of the telltale signs were there in the making of a sexual predator. I don't know if you can say, oh, he's going to be a killer at this point, let alone a serial killer. But if you want to just talk about a pure pedophile, he had the petty crimes. He was a juvenile delinquent. He was molested. He was a molester, and he was a pedophile. But you have to combine that with, what did he learn? And he learned survival skills, like being tough, like being a good communicator, talk his way out of things, talk his way into things, con people. He was a liar and a con man. So he was basically being groomed, and then I think grooming himself through his survival skills to be much more than just a sexual predator.
Yeah. So also with him, I was thinking about the fact of, you said survival skills, right? So we see a lot of this childhood like this, getting into crimes, committing more crimes. They become more and more a little more daring. You start telling people that you have these tendencies, right? Like he told Linda about these tendencies. And then you become, like you said, you have to survive your environment. And I think that's just the way he grew up and that's what he was used to doing. But then I was very surprised that he went into the Air Force, John.
But we see that a lot. How many of these serial killers, unfortunately, have we seen that have joined the military? And I don't know if they think they're going to escape their life, their miserable life. Are they going to escape themselves? That's kind of what my feeling is after looking case after case after case and seeing all of these different offenders that join the military. Something happens. They probably should be dishonorably discharged. We've seen them commit crimes. We've seen them commit rapes. We've seen them do all kinds of things. But for whatever reason, they get honorably discharged or back out on the street. We've seen it over and over. He did. He joined the Air Force. He served as a cook in Alaska, where he was arrested for theft. But the charges were dropped. They then sent him to Vietnam. Hey, you can't behave here in Alaska. We got a war going on. You're going to Vietnam. And he actually served as a gunner on a helicopter. And his Air Force record says that he risked his life to save a wounded soldier and received a medal for it. So there's something good there. There's something in I've got to help. I've got to be better. I've got to, help my fellow man. But then at the same time, we see on his record multiple relationships with young girls when he was in Vietnam, multiple homosexual encounters while he was in Vietnam, and he even sexually assaulted 2 soldiers under his command at gunpoint. And finally, that was enough even for the military. And in 1968, they gave him a dishonorable discharge at age 21 and said, get out of here. So I don't know what happened to the sexual assault of the 2 soldiers. I imagine it just went away. He wasn't charged with it, never went to prison for it. He was just basically booted out of the military.
Fun fact, John, my father was a gunner on a helicopter in Vietnam.
Wow.
And you can't make that up. He was.
Yeah, nope. There you go.
So that's interesting. But I also am looking at the fact that these are, he's having multiple relationships with young girls, committing crimes still. Like you said, do they join to give back and do better? Or are they looking for more victims? I don't know. I can't tell him this because he's committing crimes, has victims, and he's serving as a cook. But then, they say, hey, get to Vietnam. So you can't really tell here. Was he joining to have, to be a predator, or was he joining to, have a better life?
Yeah.
Hard to tell here.
No, you're exactly right. What was his mindset? Was he trying to change his basically miserable life? Or was he looking for a different way to find victims? He really sabotaged himself when he was arrested for theft in Alaska. He could have probably done his entire tour in Alaska. Pretty easy job in the military. Yeah, the weather's not great all the time, but let's face it, as opposed to going to Vietnam, he sabotaged himself by getting arrested. They sent him to Vietnam. He looks like maybe he's turning things around, doing a little better, but we're not seeing the dark side, the young girls, the numerous relationships, and certainly not the sexual assault of soldiers under his command. And the military did not work out. They didn't want him. They got rid of him. And now he's back here. And I think when we're profiling these individuals, and that's what we do on this show, we can really see where that nature and nurture are starting to come together. Was it in his nature? Even when you put him in a different situation, Alaska, you put him in a different situation, Vietnam, you put him as a gunner on a helicopter, a totally different situation, that nurture still is coming out. Abused by his mother, father, and grandparents, molested at school, molested in jail. He molests neighbor children and sexually assaults people in Vietnam.
Stealing, petty crimes. I mean, to be going to neighborhood children, there's a little bit of dare in this man, a little bit. Just at a very young age, admitting some things that I don't know if a lot of teenagers would really know, and to be able to dissect. And I think he just had this going on for so long in his mind, and he really wasn't ashamed to talk about it. I mean, he has 4 accomplices eventually, so
Yep.
he shares this about himself.
Well, and I mean, he's only 21 at this point. Look at the
I mean,
list of crimes at 21, everything from the petty crimes to sexual assault, and he's only 21. Well, let's get into 1968, and he's going to kind of start a rampage of sexual assault before he even gets to murder. On November 17th, he raped and beat and left unconscious a 14-year-old boy. On the 26th, he raped and beat a 17-year-old boy and used a tire iron to beat him. On December 4th, I mean, you're talking about weeks here. He handcuffed, raped, and beat a 17-year-old boy. So now we see that he's getting more violent. It's not just the sex. It's not just a rape anymore. He's beating brutally young boys that he comes across or hunts down.
I mean, we're talking about a week difference on the first, these 3 crimes, or the first couple of crimes, and then January 1st, January 12th, January 28th. I mean, John, serial killers, they do have, when we're profiling, right? I'm sure you talk a lot about this, is the fact of how much time goes by in between the crimes. Is there a rhythm to what they're doing? But these are so close together. It's like it has to be constantly fed, right? The urge has to be constantly fed.
He's definitely a serial rapist at this point. And you're exactly right. He's feeding that desire. You're talking about November 17th, November 26th, December 4th, January 1st, January 12th. That is a very short period of time, and he keeps committing the same offenses, raping and beating folks. And finally, it was stopped on January 28th. Like most offenders, he's not going to stop until he gets caught. He was arrested after an officer saw a sketch that they did from one of the young boys he assaulted, and he was charged with multiple felony counts of kidnapping, rape, and assault. And when they evaluated him and said he's a sexual psychopath, and they sent him to a mental hospital for sex offenders because, believe it or not, even after all this, they considered him treatable. That's what his record said.
I was thinking to myself, okay, they got him. Like, after the arrest, the crimes, the kidnapping, the rapes, the assaults. But gosh, to think he had so many more victims after this, and that he was considered treatable. And so when we're talking about profiling, does he have a victimology right now? Is there some consistency with him at this point? Where do you see that at this point?
Yeah, great question. He certainly has a victimology. He goes for young white males between 12 and 19 years old. He looks for people that are smaller, that are weaker. He has his favorite tools he uses, like the tire iron, to subdue them, even though they're smaller and weaker. He seeks out hitchhikers or those that simply look like they need a ride, need some help, need some assistance. So he is out there at this point trolling for his victims, but he does have a very distinct victimology that we can hone in on.
So how is he getting his victims, John? Is he luring them? Is he convincing them to go with him? What is his MO for being a predator?
Well, remember we talked about those survival skills earlier on and how he had to learn to be a good communicator, how he was a con man, how he was a sociopath. So, yes, he lures his victims in. He knows exactly what to say. He knows exactly who to look for. He may spend hours out on the road trolling the streets looking for a victim until he sees the perfect one. Then he engages in conversation. He may lure them in with money, with offer of sex or drugs. As soon as they get in the car with him, he overpowers them and handcuffs them. His weapon of choice, we've seen, and we're going to see this unfortunately continue on for a long time, is a tire iron. So probably something that at one point was convenient in his vehicle.
Yep.
Now he keeps it with him to use it to subdue his victims. He then rapes them. Some of them he robs. Others he threatens to kill. And so when we start profiling this sexual predator, this serial sexual predator, we can see a very organized, very distinct MO. He's bringing his tools with him to lure the victim in, subdue the victim, keep the victim restrained, and then do what he wants at this point with the victim. So he's got a victimology. We see that profile, and he's got a very distinct MO as a serial sexual predator. We see that right now.
Okay, John, he ends up in a Atascadero State Hospital in California. So, what did they find out about this guy? What was his time like when he was there?
Well, first of all, they tested him and found out he had an IQ of 121, a above normal IQ. We've seen this, unfortunately. I think around 45% of all serial killers above average. And this is a guy, remember, that never graduated high school. They did a lot of diagnosis on him. He was manic depressive. He was a sexual sadist, and he had antisocial personality disorders. Easy for me to say. He had extensive scars on his body from his childhood and teen years of being abused. And in 1969, he was classified as an extreme sociopath with high probability of recidivism. So in 69, they said this guy is an extreme sociopath, and we think if we let him out, he's going to keep repeating these offenses of kidnapping, torture, rape, assault.
Well, they were right.
Yeah, but doing that, they declared him untreatable at the mental institution, and they sent him to a medical facility. When he went to the medical facility, he was again determined to be unsuitable for further treatment, and he sexually assaulted two other inmates and then told him, "I'm not leaving anyone else alive ever again to find out what happened." So he's in the medical facility, already been declared untreatable. They declare him unsuitable for further treatment, basically throwing up their hands. There's nothing we could do with this guy, and he's raping inmates at this point.
I mean, that's incredible. And you don't have him. I mean, this is at the state hospital, and then extreme sociopath, right? High probability of committing these crimes again. But they just kind of keep passing him off a little bit, right? The hospital, and then getting him into a medical facility. People just don't know what to do with him. I mean, how do you fix him? Or can he be fixed? But, not out of sight, out of mind. They wanted him out of their facilities. And now you have him sexually assaulting other inmates. I mean, he's just not safe to be around anyone anywhere.
No, I mean, he should be locked up and incarcerated in solitary and never seen again, spend the rest of his term there. But that's not what happens. In 1974, so after about 3 years of being in this medical facility, he volunteered for a treatment program. We
Okay.
know he's a sociopath. We know he's a con man. What do you think happened? Because this isn't the first serial killer we've seen volunteer for some type of
Mhm.
experimental program to get the benefits.
I think maybe people started to like him. Maybe he made friends. Maybe people started to, he was, again, sweet talking. And people started to think, should this guy really be in here? Maybe he's not a danger to anyone else anymore. Maybe we should give him another chance.
That's exactly right. I mean, he played the system. He was a pure sociopath. He told them what they wanted to hear. And these guys, again, you go back to, you see people out there and they may have it where they think in their soul they're doing the right thing. They're giving somebody a second chance. But my gosh, in
Right.
California, in the prison system, in the mental health system, in the medical facility system, we see over and over and over again these guys released and they go on to commit even more horrific crimes. Whoever it was in charge of this program, which I doubt it had any validity whatsoever, declared after all of the predecessors declared he was untreatable and unsuitable for further treatment, they all of a sudden said, oh, he's had an epiphany. He's no longer a danger to others. I don't even know
I
what to
don't,
say
I
about
wish,
these folks.
I don't know. I wish I was that convincing, John. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to convince people like that to believe in you.
Psychiatrists, psychologists, right?
Yes, like professionals. I mean, we saw this with the socialites, right? In the episode we had done last time. It's like, being able to talk to people of influence. And I mean, it's just crazy that he's able to con the personality of someone he is not. And that's what he's showing to them, just who he's not. And in 1975, John, he goes on to commit another crime.
Right after he gets out of the medical facility, he picks up a 14-year-old boy, kidnaps him, rapes him at gunpoint, beats him before letting him go, and then he attempted to abduct another 15-year-old boy right after that. Well, fortunately, he was arrested and convicted and sentenced to 1 to 15 years. Now, this is after all of those rapes, what he was adjudicated, he was sent to the mental facility for 5 sexual assaults. He had done 2 more in the military. He had done numerous more even before his military. And now he's arrested yet again and serves less than 2 years. And this
Is some
time
of
he
this luck,
says,
Don? Is some of this luck? Like
no,
how is this
it,
happening?
it's a broken
How are 2
system.
years?
It's a
Ugh.
totally broken criminal justice system. It's people in power that think, oh, we can rehabilitate these guys. Oh, we can fix these guys. Oh, they were young. Oh, they need to be given a second chance. We have a very finite population of criminals in this country, and unfortunately, a very, very small percentage that does ever get rehabilitated. I'm not saying don't give people a break, but when you're 7, 9, 12 sexual assaults, beatings, kidnappings in, and you're still being let go, absolutely ridiculous. And this time, he said to somebody, I'm out now, but I'm never going to go back and I'm never going to leave a victim alive again. Now, as you know, on each episode of True Crime and Wine, we feature one of our Casaro Winery brands. And it's fitting to share with everyone that I'm enjoying today a glass of our Tempranillo. You know, Brandy and we love doing the show. We get to drink and host a podcast. It's so much fun. But this Tempranillo, it grows extremely well here in Texas. Very, very popular Texas grape. It's a dry red with notes of fruit like cherries, figs, and some peppery spices. And Tempranillo pairs well with barbecue beef, with carne asada, and with fajitas because it brings out the smoky, spicy flavors of the meats. So, of course, there's absolutely no better wine to enjoy when you're listening to your favorite true crime and wine podcast. This week, it's our Casaro Tempranillo. And as always, you can find it on CasaroWines.com. CasaroWines.com. You can order it. We'll ship it right to your door. Our Tempranillo or any of our other varietals. Salute.
Okay, John. So this guy is graduating from assaults to murder. And we talk about organized serial killers, disorganized serial killers. Man, he's got a plan. He puts a van together that is customized with no interior door handles, John. He's got a kill kit. He enjoys the screams of his victims. When you're profiling this and looking at this guy, you know, what are your senses? What does this tell you about him and what he's doing and what he's going to be doing in the future?
Well, he goes right to the top of the chart of organized killers, right? He's very, very organized. Most of our killers carry a kill kit with them, but he went to the extent of purchasing a vehicle, a van, and then modifying the van. And again, he's not the only serial killer to do this. We've seen him put braces in there. We've seen him put chains in there. He takes the interior door handles off. So he's not the first one to do it, but he certainly is part of a long line of serial killers that said, I'm using this vehicle. I'm going on the prowl. And when I find a victim, I have the perfect container to keep them locked and restrained in here to do whatever I want with them. And of course, he drives around with his kill kit. He's got his tire iron with him, and it's easy. They're voluntarily getting in the van. Remember, he's picking up hitchhikers, and he'll graduate to prostitutes shortly, but he's picking them up. They're willingly getting in the van. He then easily subdues them, throws them in the back where he can chain them up and spend hours or days with them, and then simply discard their bodies. He pulls up alongside a highway and throws them out. He would cruise for men. He said that he was a bisexual that hated to be a homosexual. And he cruised for men on Friday and Saturday, but reserved Sunday for his girlfriend.
Mm. You know, why do all the serial killers have girlfriends? And John, maybe we don't have to talk about it on this episode, but you know, I think of Bundy and a lot of others that had girlfriends that never harmed them.
Right.
And I would love to talk about that sometime. Do they have a connection? Do they see this person as someone that is like a confidant or someone that they can come home to or connect with? I have always been curious about that.
Yeah, no, it's a very strange relationship. And you're right. We see it with a number of serial killers because when they're arrested, all of a sudden people asking, well, how could the wife not know? How could the girlfriend not know? But they are sociopath. They keep their lives separate and they're great manipulators and liars, and their spouses, their girlfriends, honestly never know the dark side of their life.
Which is absolutely unbelievable that they can keep that completely separate, knowing the kinds of crimes he's committing, cruising on Fridays and Saturdays. So what happens in 1979?
Well, that's where he really earns his moniker, kind of the Highway Strangler, because he does graduate to murder. He kills Thomas Lundgren, a 13-year-old, and Bonin met him in a skate park, and guess what Bonin posed as? We've seen it almost every week. A photographer. And he told this little 13-year-old, hey, you let me photograph you, I'll put you in a skateboarding magazine. He then convinced him to get in his vehicle, strangles him, slashes his throat, stabs him, and bludgeons him before cutting off his genitals. And then he dumped his partially clad body in a field and his clothes and genitals in another field, also by a highway not far away. And this is the first time that we see that he's assisted by somebody else. He actually has another adult in the vehicle with him named Vernon Butts. And Vernon Butts not only helped with the murder, but as we understand it, helped with strangulation, stabbing, and torturing this young man.
So he's been able to talk someone into assisting him or getting him to trust him to assist him. I don't know what those conversations are like, how he was able to convince, I mean, his high IQ, he convinced a whole treatment, group that he was reformed, right? And to give him another chance. So, you have the manipulation and then you have him actually a part of the crime. It's not as though he's luring and then not participating, but he is participating in these actual acts. But at least 12 murders, John, we said this earlier, that he was, helped by one or more of his friends in assisting this. Vernon Butts, Gregory Miley, James Monroe, William Pugh. I mean, how does this happen, John? Do you see this in a lot when you're profiling? Do you see assistants?
No, you really don't. Very rarely do you see one or more serial killers working together. And here we have accomplices to this serial killer that there's 4 different accomplices over the course of at least a dozen murders that we know of. 4 different people that at different times he talks into, hey, go with me. We're going to pick up a young boy and we're going to rape him. We're going to kidnap him. We're going to beat him. We're going to torture him. And then we're killing him. And these guys go with him. And they go willingly and knowingly. Matter of fact, Vernon Butts assisted in at least 9 of the 12 murders that we know he used other accomplices. So again, Brandy, we try to pick really, really unique stories for True Crime and Wine, and this is one of the most unique. And I scratched my head. I said, how do you convince others to kill? I just, how do you convince, again, it's one thing. Hey, come with me. I'm going to commit a burglary. Maybe I'm going to commit a robbery. When you start getting it up to kidnapping and rape and murder, how do you talk somebody into that? He certainly was a good communicator. He was charming. He was intelligent. He was manipulative. We knew that, right? And he was organized and prepared. That's the only way you could possibly do this.
Was he promising them? Was he promising them things, John? Was he having relationships with these men? We know says he's, bisexual, but hates homosexuality or hates being a homosexual himself. Is he luring them himself and committing these acts of crimes, but in a relationship type of sense? I feel like there has to be something else there with this.
Well, definitely he's the domineering partner of all these crimes. And all of these guys are submissive to him. I think we see that some have a much lower IQ, some are smaller, some are weaker, and he is luring them, just like his previous victims, with promises of sex, of alcohol, and of drugs, and that's how they're going with them. But again, even with that, my gosh, to get someone to commit murder and torture with you, it's almost unbelievable to me. And he does it not once, but with 4 different people.
So Vernon Butts is the first. He's young too, 21 years old at the time, comes from a broken home, attempts suicide a couple of times, bisexual himself, drug and alcohol abuser. So we see some of the tendencies that we also kind of see in Bonin.
Yeah, exactly. He had a very scary, similar
Yeah.
upbringing to Bonin himself, with a broken home and attempting suicide multiple times. He said he was Bonin's lover, and that's why he did it. He had an extensive criminal history, so he might have figured, I've got nothing to lose if I get caught. But he also said during his trial that Bonin had a hypnotic control over him. And I don't know if it was hypnotic in the clinical sense, but certainly he was submissive to Bonin. But then again, being submissive once, but doing it 9 times,
I know.
and just crazy.
Well, now we're going to get into the month of August in 1979. And we talked earlier about how close he's committing these crimes. Sometimes they're 4 days apart, sometimes there's a week apart. But, John, we have August 4th, August 5th, August 9th, August 20th, August 27th. I mean, you have 5 crimes within a 23-day period. So tell us about this deadly month.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. But I'm not going to go into each of these because it's absolutely horrible. But on almost all of these young people, he picked them up, raped them, tortured them, strangled them. So now he's, the tire iron was just to immobilize them. He's strangling them and then leaving them by the side of the road. 17-year-old, one of his victims, Marcus, he stabbed 77 times. You talk about overkill. Overkill.
That's right.
He was arrested on August 9th. So in the middle of this killing spree, he actually got arrested for molesting a 17-year-old, which violated his parole, should have sent him back to prison. But another administrative error set him free. Again, over and over, he's free. Now, on August 20th, just days after he's set free, he picks up somebody else, rapes them, beats them, tortures them, and strangles them. This time it's an 18-year-old. And just a week after that, the same thing. Abducts, beats, tortures, rapes, and strangles to death a 15-year-old and leaves him alongside the highway. So a horrible, deadly month, but one interrupted by arrest, and yet he's let go on an administrative error.
So I'm seeing now we're having male victims. Seems to be his choice at this point. 15 years old, 17 years old, 17 years old. So is the profile staying the same? Because remember, there were girls earlier. What are you seeing now? Does the victimology ever change with serial killers? Do they then go from women to men? Is that common? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, it seemed like when he was young, he did sexually assault or molest some young females, but it was mostly males, even when he was young. In his immediate post-army years, we already looked at the victimology. Young white males, weaker, smaller than him. And we see this as he graduates to murder, that seems to be his victim of choice, is smaller, weaker, young white males. He picks them up on the street. They're hitchhiking or prostituting. He lures them in with promises of drugs or sex or alcohol. And so we see him basically evolving from a molester to a serial killer at this point. And certainly as we move from August into September and December of 1979, it does not get any better. So he's raping, murdering, gets arrested, gets let out, and continues to do it.
And then you have another accomplice, right? Have him talking these poor men into doing this with him. But you go, one of them, like you said, lower IQ, 56 IQ. I mean, that's extremely low, John. That's very, he's manipulative. He's able to, and again, September, November, December, I mean, all in the same year. So he's not being stopped. September to December, and he's continuing to commit these crimes, and he's being arrested. That is just what I can't get over, is the times that this man could have been stopped doing this, if the system would have just said no more. He's not rehabilitating. Okay, so let's talk about January to February in 1980.
Yeah, well, let's go back a second about Gregory Miley, because he did seem to be a different character than Vernon
Okay.
Butt. Vernon, grew up very much like Bonin did. Miley was illiterate, an IQ of 56. His mother had a series of bad marriages and had a broken home life. His mother severely neglected him. He didn't see Bonin as a lover, even though they had sex. He saw him as kind of a father figure. So now we've got one guy that sees him as a lover, and September through December is horrific with Butt and him killing. And now we bring Gregory Miley into it, and now Miley's assisting him in these murders, and it continues on. So, I mean, we've seen multiple homicides: August, September, October, November, and December of 1979. I mean, I don't want to bore our listeners with recounting every single one, but it doesn't stop in January and February. January 1st, right? New Year's Day, picks up and beats, strangles to death a 16-year-old and dumped him alongside the highway. February 3rd, he picked up, beat, raped, and strangled another young man, a 15-year-old. And then 5 minutes later, literally 5 minutes after he dumped the body of Charles Miranda, he decided to kill another person, picked up, beat, and strangled to death a 12-year-old before dumping him in a construction site. Now, the next day, he gets arrested on a parole violation. We're talking February, what is this? 4th. He's arrested again on yet another parole violation, and he's released March 4th. Released again. Absolutely crazy.
5 minutes later, John, he commits another murder. I don't know if I've ever covered a case 5 minutes later. Have you? I mean,
Right.
that's unbelievable. The satisfaction, again, the urge, the need to satisfy wasn't good enough with Charles Miranda, right? He decided 5 minutes later he's going to go and then kill another person. I mean, just unbelievable.
Yeah, there was no cooling down period, right? And certainly we see that cycle of a serial killer from literally August through February, where he kills and then he falls into that depression and then he kills again. And we see that cycle continuing and continuing. But no, I think you're right, Brandy. I don't know of another case that he killed another person 5 minutes later. It's not like they were in the van together. It's not like they were standing together. He killed him, dumped the body, immediately saw another potential victim, picked him up, and did the same thing.
Now, so with your profiling, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, he's really got a pretty fixed MO now, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about. We are now profiling his MO because we're starting to see some consistencies, right? Beatings, raping, torturing, stabbing. What else is in his arsenal? What else is he doing to his victims?
Well, his MO at this point is really fixed. He is a very evolved serial killer at this point. He would seek out hitchhikers prostitutes, other folks wanting sex, drugs, or alcohol in Los Angeles and Orange County. He kept a very kind of small area. He would pick them up or abduct them if they didn't go willingly, mostly young white males, but there were a couple of Latino or Hispanic victims. Pretty much all of them. He beat, he raped, he tortured, he stabbed, and then he strangled them to death. But then with some of them, he also added the element of necrophilia. So he would actually have sex with them even after they were dead. And Brandy, I know you could see it. It's on my screen and your screen. The inside of his van, that killing machine that he built. You might see. I mean, he's got pillows in there and blankets and carpet, and people don't see his kill kit. They jump in the van and he goes, "Look, we don't have to go anywhere. We have our own mobile hotel right here." What they don't know is once they get in, they're never going to get out alive. Now, I'm very excited about this news, and I've got to pass it along. It's been a long time in the making, and we talked about it in a previous episode. We're going to continue to talk about it. It continues to grow as our true crime lovers around the country, I think 43 states, are ordering our true crime and wine brands and joining the True Crime and Wine Club. Yes, a wine club specifically designed for true crime lovers. It features our double gold winning Crime Scene, our red blend that won top Texas wine, and our latest edition called Cold Case. You can tell it by the murder board on the label. And in the coming months, we'll also be releasing several other wines into this club. As always, it's free to join. You only pay for the 2 bottles you receive each and every quarter. So how do you join the True Crime and Wine Club? Just go to CasaroWines.com. Casaro, Cassaro, wines.com. Click on the True Crime and Wine page and sign up today, and you can join Brandy and I as we enjoy our true crime and wine on the podcast. Salute.
Okay, John. So now we have his third accomplice, James Monroe, 18 years old, homeless drifter, a runaway from Michigan, worked as a prostitute in Hollywood, ended up having a relationship with Bonin. So what do we know about this guy? Is James similar to the other 2 accomplices, or is he a little different?
Well, I mean, he's similar, probably doesn't have the background, at least as a child, that the other ones did, really broken home, bad background. But at only 18, he is homeless and drifting around, finds his way to Hollywood where he makes money as a prostitute. He does get involved with Bonin and has a relationship with him. And that's kind of the interesting dynamic here. Most of the people Bonin picks up, he rapes, tortures, and kills. But for whatever reason, there's some of these guys that he has the power to convince them to help him rape, torture, and kill. And James Monroe is one of these. We know that he partnered with Bonin on at least one kill, that of Stephen Wells, and that he helped dump the body at a gas station. So a little bit different, wasn't dumped along the side of a road. But then afterwards, he said, I don't think I can stay around. Whether he wanted to get away from Bonin, whether he thought he might become one of Bonin's next victims, but he fled to Michigan, where he was eventually arrested and extradited back to California, and we'll see him stand for trial for charges a little bit later on.
So we got into January and February of 1980. Now we're in March to May. Is this still a killing spree? Is he still having victims close in this time frame? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, this just looks like August, September, and November, December all over again. This guy is just absolutely on a rampage. March 21st, he goes ahead and kills two victims. So now this is the second time that we've seen him kill two victims in one day, a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old. On the 25th, he kills another victim, a 15-year-old. As he rolls into April, he kills two more, a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old. And in May, does it again with two more, a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. But the MO is all the same throughout. He's got his accomplices helping him. He's picking up these young men. He's abducting them, restraining them, torturing them, beating them, killing them, and then dumping them alongside of the road. So this, out of all the killers that we've talked about, Brandy, I mean, this guy literally at this point is an absolute killing machine. If you look
Yes.
at his victims from 79 and 80, the list is absolutely unbelievable.
And there's a lot of rage, I think, in these killings, 77 times to be stabbed. I mean, we've covered cases like this, overkill. They're already deceased and you continue to stab them. And then you have this close time frame. The satisfaction is not being filled. You have to, again, kill two people in one day. Let's talk about Pew. So this is the last and the fourth accomplice. So what do we know about him?
Yep. Well, we know that he was arrested for auto theft and that he had helped Bonin with at least one of the murders. And while he was in custody and attending counseling, awaiting trial, he heard on a radio broadcast about another one of Bonin's murders. Well, of course, no one knew the suspect was at that point, but he told the counselor, hey, I know who did that killing. I actually know his MO, and he spilled all of the details to the counselor. The counselor immediately notified LAPD and Homicide Sergeant St. John, who interviewed Pugh and determined that Bonin was the guy that was kidnapping, raping, torturing, and killing these victims, leaving their bodies by the highway. So William Bonin was the Highway Strangler. Now, the police started looking into him. They, of course, see his extensive criminal background. And they put a surveillance team on him, Brandy, to monitor all of his movements. But they did it an hour too late. On June 2nd, 1 hour before LAPD set up their surveillance team, Bonin picked up, beat, and strangled to death a young man, 18-year-olds, in his apartment before placing him in a cardboard box, moving him in the van, and dumping him in a nearby canyon. 1 hour before LAPD got there with their surveillance team.
Unbelievable, but I'm glad they're watching him now. I'm glad they're keeping an eye on him. And is this going to lead to something? Does he continue to try to hunt? Does he think anybody is watching him? Does he get arrested? What happens next?
Yeah, he's a serial sexual predator, a serial killer. They don't just stop, right? They don't stop. They get killed or they get arrested. On June 11th, officers finally got a break in the case. They observed Bonin driving through Hollywood, trying to lure no less than 5 boys into his van before succeeding on the 6th attempt. And that just gets back to what we said, a half hour ago. Here was a sexual predator, always on the hunt, always on the prowl. He would spend hours in that van waiting for just the right victim. And when he picked up that sixth little boy, police followed him to a parking lot of a gas station by a highway, by the way. They approached the van. They heard screaming and made entry, finding Bonham raping a gagged and bound victim. Inside the van, of course, they discovered his restraining devices, knives, that infamous tire iron we talked about several times. They even made notes in their initial notes that all the door handles had been removed from the inside. And they discovered numerous blood stains. And in the glove box of the van, this guy kept newspaper articles about his murders. So he would commit the murder, go home and read about it, cut it out, and keep it in the glove box of his van. Absolutely amazing. They had all the evidence they needed.
Souvenirs, we talked about this. They like to keep something, right? Newspaper clippings. There was a couple cases I covered where they would put the clippings on the wall, right, in their house, so they would be constantly reminded of their crimes when they walk into, their home, their safe space, I suppose. But they have this guy, right? At this point, what are police? Do they get a confession out of him? Does he admit to anything? I mean, they caught him red-handed of trying to abduct not only one child, but the sixth one of the day.
Yep. Yes. And so Bonin knows he's caught at this point. He confesses to 21 murders. And hair and fiber evidence found in the van tied him to many of those murders, as well as blood and semen found in the van. So, yeah, I mean, he confessed to him. At least 6 of the murders, he used what's called a windlass, which is a method of strangulation. That's what he would use on some of his victims. He went to trial. Prosecutors in detail, and I wasn't going to do this during this podcast. We really glossed over how gory his crimes were, but they described to the jury each rape, torture, and murder. Now, the defense called it revulsion tactics, but Bonham deserved everything he got because he said he got extreme pleasure from his victim's suffering. And he got what he earned, the death penalty.
He got extreme pleasure from his victim's suffering, right? Gosh, That says a lot. The infliction of pain, the screaming that he enjoyed hearing. So these were not only sexually motivated, but he wanted to know they were hurting and dying, and it's just unbelievable.
Well,
that he actually enjoyed this.
When we look at the 4 categories, it wasn't the murder, it wasn't the sex, it was obviously the torture, right? That's what got him off, was that torture. And this is how bad this guy was. His own defense attorney didn't even ask the jury to find him not guilty. He simply said, please just give him a reasonable verdict. And
I don't know how you defend that at all. So,
right.
I mean, and he's admitted to it, and there's 21 so far, that we know of that he's confessed to. But is he convicted? You said he gets the death penalty. So where does he spend his time?
Well, there were multiple trials because he got victims in both L.A. and Orange County. So he was convicted of 10 murders and sentenced to death in Los Angeles, and convicted of 4 additional murders and sentenced to death again in Orange County, California. He was sent to San Quentin prison to await the gas chamber. And so now we've got him. He's going to die. He's in San Quentin. What about his accomplices, right? Because he had those 4 other guys working with him. And let me tell you, Butts, who committed at least 9 of those murders with him, never stood trial. He killed himself in his jail cell. So, but
Yeah.
never stood trial. George Miley sentenced to life. James Monroe sentenced to life. And William Pugh, remember the young man that was the car thief that overheard the radio broadcast and told his counselor that really brought Bonham down? He
Yeah.
received a 6-year sentence.
Yeah, and we see that sometimes with because would they have even caught him if not for Pew? I don't know. But they gave him the key to the gate. So 6 years, not enough, but I can understand where prosecution and the law was coming from in that case.
And
Okay,
maybe
so
that
did he get
that was his
executed? Yeah,
downfall, right? We're talking about
yeah,
how unique the
yeah,
case is, that he was able to talk multiple people into helping him
yes.
rape, torture, and murder. That ultimately was his downfall, and that's kind of one of those things you hear all the time. It's almost impossible to have a conspiracy because somebody's going to talk, right?
Yeah. And that's four different people that could have talked. And remember what he said, I'm not keeping anyone alive. Well, he did.
Yep.
And he used them more, whether he felt something towards them and that made him decide to use them more as a friend, an accomplice than an actual victim. I mean, we'll never really know. But you definitely see that, in this case. So is he finally executed, John?
Unlike a lot of these serial killers that just die in jail, he was
Yeah.
executed on February 23rd, 1996. He said, even in his last statement, that he shouldn't be executed because he had no control over his actions. And I thought it was quite fitting to learn that none of his family attended the execution or claimed the body. Nobody wanted anything to do with this sociopath, sexual predator, and multiple time serial killer. Well, as we put a cork in this edition of our True Crime and Wine podcast, I want to remind listeners that you can follow us on all of our socials at JJ True Crime and Wine on all of the platforms. And you can sign up for our True Crime and Wine Club at CasaroWines.com. Just go to the True Crime and Wine page. And finally, you can also see some of our merch, like our True Crime Profiler's Notebook at shoptruecrime.com. So you can profile along with Brandy and I. Now, I think that wraps up the business for today. And with that, I want to thank, of course, my co-host, Brandy Diamond, for joining me on this journey, and our producer, Lauren Bedsole, back in the Corsicana Command Center, for helping make this show possible. And we'll see y'all next week when we present The Pig Farmer, a serial killer who openly walked through town covered in blood, and no one, including the police, suspected anything. I'm John Matthews, and thanks for joining us today for True Crime and Wine. Salud.